There is a sound that no longer exists in the skies over Britain. It wasn't just the noise of a jet engine. It was something deeper, something you felt in your chest before you heard it with your ears. Pilots called it raw power. The public called it the howl. For decades, that howl was the sound of a nation's defense during the darkest days of the Cold War. Later, it became the star attraction at air shows, a thunderous reminder of a time when British engineering ruled the skies. Recently, a viewer on our channel commented that they still remember that sound, howling in the sky above them, and how much they miss seeing the last one fly. They aren't alone. Today, on Hidden Valor, we aren't talking about a secret mission or a combat victory. We are talking about the end of an era. This is the story of XH558. The last Vulcan bomber to ever fly in the incredible battle to keep that legendary Howl alive just a little bit longer. To understand why people loved this plane so much, you have to understand what it was built to do. The Avro Vulcan wasn't a toy. It was designed in the late 1940s for one terrifying purpose: to carry nuclear weapons deep into the Soviet Union if World War III ever started. It was a delta-wing monster, built to fly high and fast, often faster than the fighters of its day. It looked like a spaceship. It was huge, painted in brilliant anti-flash white to reflect the blinding heat of a nuclear explosion. For 30 years, these aircraft sat on quick reaction alert. Their crews were ready to scramble in minutes, knowing that if they took off for real, there might be no home to come back to. They were the silent guardians, the ultimate deterrent. But then, the Cold War ended. The Berlin Wall fell. The mission changed. By the early 1990s, the Royal Air Force had no need for these expensive, complex bombers. One by one, they were sent to museums or tragically scrapped for metal. The roar of the VForce was fading away. But one Vulcan refused to die. Its tail number was XH558. It was known as the Spirit of Great Britain. While its sisters were being cut up, XH558 was kept in flying condition for air displays by the RF until 1993. But then, even that became too expensive. It was grounded. It was sold off. It looked like the end. But the British public wasn't ready to let go. A massive, almost impossible campaign started to save it. They needed millions of pounds. They needed spare parts that hadn't been made in decades. They needed engineers who knew secrets that were fading into history. It took 14 years and over £7 million, mostly donated by ordinary people who just wanted to hear that sound one more time. In 2007, against all odds, XH558 roared back to life. It was the only flying Vulcan in the world. So, what was this howl that everyone remembers? The Vulcan was powered by 4 massive Rolls-Royce Olympus engines buried deep inside its gigantic wings. These were the ancestors of the engines that would later power the Concorde. When a Vulcan took off, it didn't just climb. It leaped into the air. The pilot would push the throttles to about 90% power. At that specific setting, the air rushing into the intakes created a unique resonance. It wasn't a roar. It wasn't a scream. It was a haunting, vibrating howl that shook everything around it. It was the sound of 1950s raw power, unfiltered and unapologetic. At Air Kozo, when the pilot banked the Vulcan, displaying that massive delta shape to the crowd, the howl would echo across the airfield. People didn't just watch it. They experienced it. It was a physical sensation. For 8 glorious years, from 2007 to 2015, XH558 traveled the country, bringing that sound to a new generation. It was a flying miracle, a tribute to engineering and public will. But time is the enemy of all machines. Keeping a complex, nuclear-age bomber flying in the 21st century was a logistical nightmare. The companies that made the original parts no longer existed. The veteran engineers who knew how to fix it were retiring. In 2015, the difficult decision was made. The technical support required to keep it safe was being withdrawn. XH558 would have to be grounded forever. They announced a final tour. The last Vulcan flew across the United Kingdom one last time, saying goodbye to the nation that built it and then saved it. Millions of people came out to see it. On hillsides, at airports, and in city centers, people stood and looked up. Many of them were old men who had flown it or worked on it during the Cold War, tears streaming down their faces as they heard that howl for the very last time. On October 28, 2015, XH558 touched down at Doncaster Sheffield Airport. The engine spooled down. The howl faded into silence. And just like that, a magnificent era of aviation history ended. Today, XH558 sits on the ground. You can visit it. You can even hear its engines run sometimes during ground tests. But it will never fly again. The comment on our channel was right to miss it. The Vulcan was more than just metal and wires. It was a symbol of a time when Britain reached for the skies with terrifying ambition and breathtaking beauty. The Howl is gone now, existing only in videos and the memories of those lucky enough to have stood underneath it. But as long as we keep telling its story, the spirit of the Vulcan will never truly be silenced. Subscribe to HiddenValor to keep the legends alive.